Hey guys, this is a continuation of graphic design projects 6 and 7, the holiday fundraising postcard. So in a previous tutorial, we were talking about the um, the vector icons that you could develop and design on your own by using Adobe Illustrator software. So that was phase one, and phase two is pretty much done on my end. But what I wanted to do was just kind of walk you through the process. And so what I've done is I've created a couple. It's really funny in Adobe Illustrator, they're called artboards, but in Adobe InDesign, they just called them pages because it's more publication based. So, of course, to create a new document in Adobe InDesign, you hit Command N. This dialog will pop up. You can go to print. You can change your units. I would advise you to go to inches so that you can use the grid and the ruler within the document to create the said specs for the postcard. And I can't think of those off the top of my head, but we'll take a look here in a second. The important thing is to unclick facing pages to give your document a clear name so that maybe you can search or find it later within your file system. And also maybe to immediately say that it's going to be 2 pages. Of course, 1 page for the front and 1 page for the back. I'll leave that up to you though. And since I've already got the document created, I'm not going to hit create. I'm just going to close this out. But I wanted to show you guys this dialog box for making those adjustments. And of course, you can change the width and the height here. So I'm going to close this out. And this is the document, that I started with. It was blank, of course. And then I aligned it with the grid so I can toggle the grid on and off as I'm working. It's labeled Project 6. And let's just kind of go through these layers and see what we can find. Okay, I haven't actually looked at this document maybe a couple months, so a few things could even be a surprise to me, but I'm sure this will be well worth your time for completing this project. So just for reference, let's go back and let's find that project PDF just to kind of remind ourselves of what's going on. And you can see that I do have a file system for teaching and my own art and production and design and everything. So if I don't have a good file system going, my life's a mess. So you really do need a good system so that you can find your files and keep everything in one place. In particular, of course, that's important for InDesign, because when you are exporting documents in InDesign, the software is reliant on a solid link between the software and the actual files themselves that you're compositing and populating within the document. So project 6-7 icons, postcard, holiday fundraising. That's the project, except we've already done project 6 or phase 1, which is the vector business, the vector icon business. Now we're moving on to actually using those icons to create the fundraising postcard. And if I'm not mistaken, you should have gotten these provided assets. Here's, for some reason, I thought that this Christmas tree might be valuable to you. I think I liked it because it was a PNG, and so it has a clear background. So I ended up giving that to you, but you could have easily found that online yourself. I did give you a good copy of the DC logo, the PNG, opening that up. You're definitely going to need that for this project because this is a fundraising postcard for Dene College alumni. This is the initial photograph that was given to us. They like this photograph, but you could bring this photograph into Photoshop if you wanted. And you could add a Christmas tree, you could add Christmas lights around the gutter of this Hogun. I don't know, you could do, I mean, you're a designer, so just use your imagination, right? You sketch it out first and think creatively. It's not necessarily required that you doctor this image, but I do want to mention that if I were to doctor this image, I would not doctor the original. I would always keep an original file that I can go back to just in case I don't like what I'm doing. And that's just kind of rule of thumb in design anyway. You need to kind of like anticipate possible backstepping to protect yourself and the client and your time. This is an Illustrator file of the logo. So if you want, you can open that up in Adobe Illustrator. I did give you some precedents, kind of showing the front and the back of other fundraising programs. Not necessarily always for a school or an academic environment, but these are worth looking at. You know, the simplicity and the typography and the color schemes and the photographs, all of it. You know, it's worth taking a look at. I did give you these sample icons just to kind of like get that that process of holiday icon thinking. So I think in the last tutorial we only did a Christmas tree, but obviously you probably need some additional icons. So you know, a wrapped gift, Christmas ornament, bells, candles, anything holiday related that you felt like doing, that you could work in the context of creating a geometric version of it. And by the way, that geometric version is the way that I approached it. I would highly suggest that you maintain that path, but with all of my students, I encourage them to think outside of the box and to take ownership of projects and do what you feel is right. It's not my job to tell you what to do. It's my job to kind of facilitate and guide your process towards a final product that is professional and the kind of thing that hopefully you would, you know, feel proud of as far as including in your portfolio to get a job later. So yeah, those are some examples that you can look at. So we're just kind of reviewing a little bit right now. Let's see, backing up. So here's the InDesign file. And the reason why, reminds me, the reason why I opened this up was because I'd forgotten the dimensions of the postcard. It's 6.5 by 9 inches landscape view. So that's what's going on here. So you can kind of see, you can toggle the ruler on and off with Command R, okay? But you can see that it's 9 inches wide, okay? And 6.5 inches tall. And we have a front, page 1, and a back, page 2. So we have a clean slate to work with. And of course, you can also toggle that grid on and off, all right? Those are very handy things that I constantly do, frankly. And that's why I'm always, it may feel like repetition when you guys are looking at or reviewing these videos, but it's just bread and butter operations that I use in my process quite a bit. So I'm just kind of trying to pass the torch a little bit. When I get started, I always have a color palette, and this is the exact same color palette that was in the Illustrator document. And I can almost certainly bet that I literally just copy and pasted that over. You can copy and paste between Illustrator and InDesign, by the way. So I just copied the swatch that I had created in Adobe Illustrator and plopped it into InDesign. And a lot of that reasoning was so that I could have those colors populated within my swatch, okay? So InDesign will automatically just capture and populate those colors into the swatch, whatever you drop in there. And if you, it's pretty easy to in Illustrator particularly, it's easy to change or specify a hex color or an RGB color or a CMYK color with the color swatch or the color panel rather. So yeah, the color swatch is just handy because that's what we're doing here. Make that go away. Here's the background. So apparently I wanted a block color background, and you can kind of see the relationship. Of course, I got that from the swatch. I may have changed it through the process a little bit. The thing that I would change this time around is sometimes you do want some bleed with your swatch, so you can kind of make it come out beyond the artboard a little bit. But that's up to you. So I'm gonna Command Unz 4 times. So that's my background that I'm using. And then I'm gonna make that go away. Of course, you guys have seen me do this trick where I heavily rely on a structural grid-like framework to compose and arrange design assets that have either A, been specified by the client, or B, are being sort of imagined and created by myself and placed because I'm the designer. But it really helps me to have a system of organization. If I approach a project without a framework or a grid or a system or increments or dimensions, you can do it more fluidly. But it really kind of helps my process to have this to rely on, because the truth is, and you may have heard me say this before as well, but the grid expedites and solves design decisions very, very quickly. It's sort of like it's this co-pilot whispering in your ear, kind of guiding a rational design process. And it also makes the design process move a little bit more quickly. That's not always an issue, but in particular, if you're working in a design office and you want to leave that office before 5 o'clock and meet your deadline for your marketing director, then yeah, time is an issue, because sometimes your marketing director will say, okay, this needs to be done before you leave today. So you can either do it quickly or you can lollygag without using the grid. So I'll leave that up to you. But yeah, the grid is good. Use the grid. So you can kind of see I've created a system with this grid where I can lay things out, but ironically, it's not talking directly with this background dimensional grid. So I did kind of, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? I manipulated this system a little bit to meet my own design needs. Okay. And so I have this grid kind of resting on this other grid. Make that go away for a second. So let's see what's going on here. I don't know what I was doing. It looks to me like I went into Photoshop with I made a duplicate of the original photo and I made it black and white. And I placed that below in the layers in the scheme of the layer organization. And that opacity is 100%. And look I'm even reminding myself, like I haven't looked at this document in a couple months, but because I've sort of made a mental note here, or just a note, a layer note, I guess you would call it, I can remember what's going on. So yeah, this black and white photograph is 100%. And then I duplicated that same original photograph. And I just wanted it to lie on top in a subtle way with just a little bit of color. Okay, so I kind of muted the color a little bit so that the other information will pop a little bit more. And I would assume that when I was originally doing this document, that I was just a little uncomfortable with how bright those colors were in the background. So I was thinking about the foreground and the background and the way that information would pop. Let's see what's going on here. Let's see, here's a layer called mask. So I know what that's for. So I created this mask layer, and it's just, all it is, it's just a white fill. You can kind of see it's a white fill, but I've reduced the opacity to 65% so that I can still see the photographic information in the background. But the reason why I did that was because I wanted the typeface to pop a little bit, to pop even further, or not get lost in that photographic information. So that was just a visual tool that I used to to follow my usual rule, which is not my rule, but it's a rule that I respect a lot, and it goes like this: form follows function. So it's more important that this document function rather than look good. But those things are interrelated, right? But the typeface has to be legible to the user. And that's why this is definitely a functional move, what I'm doing here, but it's sort of an aesthetic move too, because it's clean. It's hopefully hardly noticeable in a sense. Um, so yeah, we'll come to that here in a second. So let's make that go away. Let's see, I've dropped my Christmas icons, which are those original Illustrator files that I had shown you a while back. So let's go, here we go. Where are those guys at? Here we go, assets. So you see I have two assets folder. I have provided assets for students, and then I have my own assets. So again, file management, right, folks? Here are all those icons, right, that I'm dropping in there. So you can kind of see, I mean, there's this little icon right here that indicates that things are linked, right? Oh, that means that the InDesign document is successfully talking to the Illustrator file. And I didn't even bother exporting a PNG or a JPEG out of Illustrator. I'm referencing the Illustrator file itself, which is exactly why I have a unique Illustrator file for each of these vector icons. If I weren't going to be placing these icons within InDesign, I would probably just have one Illustrator file with multiple layers. But because I knew that I was going to be placing, or I was going to need to place these guys into InDesign, I created separate files with almost identical with identical dimensions, so that there was so that there would be consistency in the way that they appear in the final document, if that makes sense. And you can kind of see, if we toggle through these, all of those icons are right smack in the middle, and they have a very similar aesthetic and color palette. So yeah, all of these guys are placed. Let's bring back the grid. I'm just kind of curious. Oh my gosh, look at this. Look at the way that I'm using the grid. And same with, if we bring this mask back, look at this. Now I did cheat a little bit. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, folks. But I did cheat a little bit down here with this mask. But this is the primary structural framework grid that I'm using to arrange my assets, okay? And you can kind of see how I've done that. Look at the symmetry as well. 1, 2 on the left, 1, 2 on the right, and this beautiful central image of the heart. And the heart indicates giving. It's a symbol of generosity, right? And we're talking about a fundraising campaign. So that's why I think it's important for this heart to be a little bit larger. So that's the designer thinking about the project and the intent of the project and the purpose of the project, and trying to visually cue the user and persuade the user, honestly, with this project to donate 5, 10, 15, or maybe even $1,000. I don't know. It depends on how well to do they are. So yeah, I just wanted to show you guys the way that I'm starting to use this background grid to make decisions. And of course, I'm using it in both locations. I'm using it on the front and the back, okay? In a consistent manner. So let's lock that down, make this go away. I'm gonna make the grid go away. So we've looked at the Christmas icons, of which I have one dedicated layer for those Christmas icons. And it's really easy to, if I unlock that layer, and I can click on this frame where I've placed an asset, I can hit Command D for place, and it's bringing up some other, it's going to a different location, so I have to navigate back to my course folder, Graphic Design 2, 6, 7, assets. Okay, so here they are. So I can select another icon and place it in there, no problem. I might have to, yeah. I don't know why that star is a little bit bigger. I can't remember how or why I formatted those on the left. But I do understand why visually, because I wanted to scale down these guys in relation to the primary symbol. But what I'm trying to show you in any case is the way that you can hit Command D and place these guys really easily. So I'm going to undo and go back and hit save. Okay. So let's see here. Where's that file? There it is. That's the original file right there in my assets folder. Save. Essentially, it's asking me to save again because I've recently updated my software, and so it's saying, okay, we want to update it as a newer version, or save it as a newer version rather. Okay, so I'm gonna lock that layer down again, and let's see what's going on. I had some snowflakes. It looks like that were resting on that mask, right? And again, you can see I'm using this system again, this grid-like system, to help me to make those design decisions so I can do this quickly. And then here's my typeface that I've dropped into this file. And let's see, if we make the grid go away for a second, you should be able to see the backdrop of the grid, but you can see I was trying to center that typeface with an equal amount of padding on the top and the bottom. And then I centered it. So, if we unlock this typography, we can select in there and we can see that I've centered the text right here. And it doesn't look like I gave it any kerning, but I was using Baskerville, which is a very classic serif font, which I've really kind of been enjoying lately. I've gone back to Baskerville quite a bit, admittedly. It's, I guess, a typeface phase that I'm going through. Now, something interesting happened. When I updated my software, I was using Trajan Pro up here. And for some reason, when I guess Adobe is no longer giving folks Trajan Pro just for free. So the Trajan Pro is no longer up here. And I really like Trajan Pro. I think it's still in, if we go over here, there it is. So this was Trajan Pro. And when I reopened this file after not using it for a while, it stated, hey, Adobe InDesign cannot find Trajan Pro, so we're just going to bump it back to a generic sans serif font. So that's why that's looking that way, unfortunately. And that's why it's highlighted as well, because it's trying to warn me that things aren't right. So, and look at, I can't find Trajan. That's really too bad because I love Trajan Pro. So I don't know, just for the sake of solving this problem quickly, I'm just going to change it to Futura. Okay. But the truth is, Futura is not a very cheerful holiday font, and I think that's why I was trying to use more decorative, ornamental fonts like Trajan Pro and Baskerville. But again, just for the sake of moving through this document, I'm just going to use Futura for now. But if you've taken a typography class with me, typefaces have personality, and they exude a certain like warmth or coolness. And Futura to me feels a little bit more cool instead of warm like Baskerville. But we can agree to disagree, or we can agree on that if you'd like. So there's all the typography. So that's pretty much, I mean, if we bring back the photo, it's a very simple document that just kind of does the job that the client was asking. And so again, all of these colors were pulled from that original photograph. So it's kind of funny. I muted the colors in the original photograph, and I transposed them to be very kind of bright and in the foreground with these icons to create space. So yeah, that's the front. And I'm pretty sure that this information was given to us directly by the client. All right. It's one of those givens. Let's see what's going on here. So it looks like there's that background, which actually I didn't bring back. So that's how it looks with this nice, beautiful background. The background with a little bit of padding works also because when this document goes to the printer, you might want a little bit of give. So this is the give where, like, what if the printer accidentally cuts a little bit in, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor there, but if it's not a perfect cutting system when it's producing these documents for distribution, that basically ensures that the photograph isn't going to be cut, or this information. So that's why I like a little bit of this sort of like bleed padding surrounding the document. And by the way, I'm doing the same thing down here, except I'm not using any color. I'm just using the actual, the non-color of the paper white, the material. I kept the back extraordinarily simple. I really had a lot of fun with the front, and the back isn't, in my mind, honestly, I think it could have been pushed much, much further. But it's definitely a functional back with the logo of the institution, with the information that was provided. And I am playing with typeface a little bit because I wanted to point this out. Submit your tax deductible donation online. And I wanted folks to be very clear on being able to find this URL. In fact, let's unlock that typography. Actually, yeah, okay, it is unlocked. So let's just dive in here and take a look. So I'm using Baskerville again without kerning, and it's Baskerville 12, but I did bump up this Baskerville to 14 and bold. And I think in hindsight, I might have given it a little bit of kerning. It's a little too much, like maybe 25. So yeah, you can kind of play with your letter forms and the hierarchy with how things are being read. And of course, I just wanted to say thank you, down here. But yeah, I mean, this is a very functional back. And again, I'm going to bring this grid. You can kind of see I'm still using this grid to kind of format things on the back as well. So even if, a client or a user rather is flipping from the front and the back, they're going to see the relationship of that framework structure that's guiding your design and aesthetic decisions on the front and the back. Last thing I want to mention is exporting this document. So let's pretend like, I've kind of gone through, I did obviously go through this project and I put everything together. I spent time creating the grid and figuring out how the grid would rest on this page, on this postcard page. I think now it's time that we start talking about, exporting this document. So you're done. Now you're going to send it to the client. So you have to, or you're going to upload it to Blackboard for me, right? So you need to export. And again, when you're exporting a document, there's a drop down here and you can send an Adobe PDF print. Okay. Make sure you use the print parentheses option. You can also send a JPEG or a PNG. Some of these other options are obviously really handy, but not relevant right now. But my go-to is PDF print, JPEG, or PNG. If you choose PDF print, you're going to get this dialog box. And then you're going to want to pay attention to a lot of these options here, but primarily compression. Because essentially what InDesign does is, imagine a crock pot and you're throwing all these different ingredients with different doc types, JPEGs, PNGs, vector-based images from Illustrator, everything. You're throwing everything into this crock pot to make a stew, and eventually you're going to want to scoop things out and put it in a bowl for someone so that they can eat whatever you've been working on. But some of those documents might be 300 DPI, some of those documents might be 72 DPI. And so what it does is InDesign sort of mediates and facilitates all of these different file types to spit out a consistent document. And so you can go to compression here, and you can change the compression. If I were sending this to a printer, I would definitely want nothing less than 300 DPI on all of these options. So we've changed it to 3. So that means for images above 450, and we could even change that. We could say for images above 300, they should be essentially downsampled into 300 DPI. So you can kind of play with these options here, and then you just hit export, okay? And I wasn't paying attention to where that file was supposed to go to, but I'm guessing, yep, there it is. Pretty sure that just happened. Okay, today at 9:23, yep. Let's click on it and see how it looks. And this is the other thing you should always be doing before you email anyone a document, is just review how it looks. Looks pretty good. You can zoom in just to kind of look around. You can use this hand icon. So you want to make sure that, like, all of these, typeface edges are real nice and crystal clear. Now, look what happened here. And that's the photograph that Dene College gave to us. So there's not really much we can do about that unless we call and ask, hey, do you have a better quality photo? But that's an issue. If I were wanting to print this professionally for an organization, I would call them back and say, we need a better file, otherwise this is going to happen. So yeah, you can kind of see that photograph was not the greatest quality. That being said, look how crystal clear these vector graphics are from Illustrator. Ooh, that's exciting. And same with, all the typeface information. It's very, very clear and beautiful. Colors are accurate. Okay, that looks good. So, but what if we want, you can upload a PDF to me, but I would also suggest, I really like PNGs. So I'm gonna go back to the software. Oops. I'm gonna go to File, Export, and I'm gonna go to my drop down and select PNG. Let's try this one more time. It says, I think we do want to replace it. Now we want all of these pages to be spit out, right? Not just one. So you have to go to all, quality, maximum, of course. Resolution, it depends. If it's, if this drop down, it's no accident that there's 72 DPI here, right? 72 DPI is screen quality. So essentially, if you're going to place this on the web, 72 DPI, right? If you're going to print this document, 300 DPI or larger. If you're, I don't know, if you're just going to print it at a local, at your office printer, I would say like 150 DPI. If you're just going to print this out and put them in some boxes, but really it's not your job to make those decisions. The client wants a high quality 300 or above DPI print because they're going to send it to an actual printer. So if I were doing this, I would probably send a very high quality PDF and high quality PNGs. And then of course I would review those files before emailing them in Preview or Adobe Pro, just to make sure that they look good. The other thing to keep in mind is color space. So right now we're not getting the option to spit this out as CMYK, but this is something to consider when you're spitting out a document, because sometimes the way these colors can be rendered in RGB, in comparison to RGB and CMYK can slightly change the color of this pink tone, for example, or these blues. So yeah, it's something to consider. Color space. Yeah, I think that's enough information. Yeah, and I think you guys can do this. Again, I really want to emphasize the use of this very simple tool, okay, to solve some of these design problems, so that you can check these boxes and add I guess fulfill the client's requests efficiently, and also express yourself as a designer. So yeah, that grid is a very good place to start, and also a color palette, of course. Okay, thanks everyone.